We've already got together 3 times the last 3 weeks to look at the Seder, the Haggadah, some of the more deeper ideas, which are beautiful concepts and material for you to share with the people at your Seder night table. Tonight is the 4th of 4 Shiurim, and I want to thank Graham and Belinda Calvert for their sponsorship. And tonight's shiur is Leilu Nishmas Zelda Bas Yisrael and Zalman Ben Chaim for an Ilu Nisham. I'd like to, the title of tonight's shiur is The Fifth Cup, which is in itself a very fascinating topic. And by way of introduction, I'd just like to start off by sharing with you a Dvar Torah, which is very close to my heart, about Pesach, but actually goes much broader than the Pesach theme. It's a general theme in Hashkafa and in the Medrash, but it comes out in Pesach. One of the sources for this idea with regards to Pesach is the Kedushas HaLevi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who makes the observation, a very fascinating observation, that Klal Yisrael have chosen to give a name to the Yom Tov different to that which is given by the Torah. The Torah, when it refers to this Yom Tov, always calls it Chag HaMatzos, the Yom Tov of the Matzos. Whereas Klal Yisrael, when we refer to this Yom Tov, we call it Pesach. The Gemara calls it Pesach. Arvei Psachim, Samach LaMincha, the Mishnah calls it Pesach, Chazal call it Pesach. The Torah never calls the Yom Tov Pesach. When the word Pesach appears in the Chumash, it always only means one thing. It means the Korban Pesach. It means the Paschal lamb, not the Yom Tov itself. And the Pasuk in fact says, Pesach L'Hashem, that the Pesach is on the 14th, not on the 15th. Right? Yom Tov starts on the 15th of Nisan. But the Pesach was shechted and brought as a korban on the 14th. So Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev makes a very fascinating observation. I'd like to try and show you how this idea really has a very broad application in many different places. And his observation is that Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu have got a mutual relationship, which is expressed in a pasuk in Shir HaShirim, particularly relevant for Pesach, of course, Shir HaShirim, and that is Ani ledoidi v'doidi li. What does that mean, Ani ledoidi v'doidi li? It means that there is a mutual love between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people, which expresses itself in the fact that whenever HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets a chance to name something or to refer to something, he chooses a reference which highlights his praise of the Jewish people, right? So here, when he is speaking about the Yom Tov, it's Chag HaMatzos, because it's part of the praise of the Jewish people that we have accepted upon ourselves for that week, please God, Emir Hashem next week, to eat matzahs. The eating of matzahs is a willingness on the part of the Jewish people to deprive ourselves of certain luxuries connected to bread and to live on matzahs, and that is the praise of Klal Yisrael. However, when we decide what to call the Chag, we call the Chag Pesach, because our interest is to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Our concern is to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Sheposach Hashem Abotim Mitzrayim, that it was the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu passed over the houses of Klal Yisrael. And this passing over, what's important to emphasize on Leil Seder is the word Pesach, passing over, means nothing less than the chosenness of Klal Yisrael. That was the moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Klal Yisrael. The moment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose that the Jewish people would be different and distinct from the other nations of this world. And that moment created the new, if you like, gave birth to the Jewish people. So in actual fact, Pesach was, in a sense, the gift from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whereas Matzos is the gift of the Jewish people to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the names chosen for the Yom Tov reflect the fact that God is praising us and we are praising him. And that is Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. One of the origins of this idea is found in a Gemara in Brachos Tafov, where the Gemara asks an unusual question. The Gemara asks a midrashic question: what is written in the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Now, of course, the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not meant to be a literal idea, it's a metaphorical idea. If you like to translate better that sentence in the Gemara, what the Gemara is asking is, were HaKadosh Baruch Hu to wear tefillin, what would be written in his tefillin? And the Gemara says something very beautiful. The Gemara says, if in our tefillin is written, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that we are affirming the uniqueness and the unity, the Yichud Hashem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then in the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is written, Umi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. In the tefillin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is written a statement emphasizing the uniqueness and the oneness of the Jewish people. So you have in that Gemara a very interesting concept of Ani L'Doidi, as the Marshal there says on that Gemara, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li, the mutual praise between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Jewish people is expressed, and that finds its expression. Also, says the Kedushas Halevi, in the names given to the Yom Tov. Interestingly, in the context of the Pesach narrative, the Kli Yakar on Shemos chapter 12 makes an interesting observation that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the beginning of Shemos chapter 12, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu all the laws of Pesach, what the Jewish people have to do, and then subsequently we get an account of Moshe relaying the messages to the Jewish people. But he makes one or two very interesting adjustments when he gives it over to the Jewish people, and it's slightly different to the way he's heard it. And one of the adjustments he makes is that God says to Moshe, they should take the blood and put it on the doorpost, or put it al shtei hamazuzos v'al hamashkov, on the two doorposts and on the lintel at the top of the door. And then when Moshe Rabbeinu says it over to the Jewish people, he reverses the order. He says, take the blood and put it al hamashkov v'al shtei hamazuzos. He changes the order. The blood should be put first on the mashkov, on the lintel, on the top of the doorpost, and then on the two doorposts. Why would he do this? So if you have a look in the Kli Yakar, one of my favorite commentaries on the Chumash, Kli Yakar was a contemporary of the Maharal of Prague, and in fact succeeded him as the Rav of Prague, Rabbi Ephraim Lunshitz of the 16th century. So he writes that this is indeed an expression of exactly this idea that we're just now talking about, because the lintel, if you like, the top of the doorpost reflected the isarusa de la Elah, meaning God's direct intervention into the course of events, is the hashpa'ah, the energy coming down from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which made Yetzias Mitzrayim possible. The two doorposts symbolically represent Moshe and Aaron, the two leaders of Klal Yisrael who took them out of Egypt. Says the Kli Yakar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu says, tell them to put the blood first on the doorpost to acknowledge the importance of the leadership of Moshe and Aaron, and then on the lintel, on the top of the door frame, to represent the Siyata D'Shmaya from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, is giving priority and precedence to the human leadership of Moshe and Aaron, and that they somehow brought HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the picture. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, when he gives the instructions, he says, no, take the blood and put it first on the lintel and then on the doorposts. In other words, the hashpah comes directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we, Moshe and Aaron, are simply merely recipients of Chazdei Hashem. What you have here is a concept, which is a very beautiful one, that we and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are, in a sense, in a mutual, loving relationship, Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. And this is at the heart of the story of the narrative of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And this is indeed why we say Shiur HaShirim is the Megillah for Pesach, because Shiur HaShirim represents exactly that love between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, which operates in both directions. Okay, I'd like to just want to mention that as an opening line of our Shiur this evening. I'd like to move on now to get a bit closer to the fifth cup, which we all recognize at Leil Seder as the Kos Shel Eliyahu, the cup of Eliyahu Hanavi. How does Eliyahu get into our Leil Seder? And what is the significance of Eliyahu Hanavi and this fifth cup, and where does it come from? Because the Mishnah only says to drink 4 cups. Where does this fifth cup come from, and what is its significance? So I'd like to start by drawing your attention to the fact, hopefully some of us were listening to the Haftorah yesterday in Shul. And I'd like to I know the Haftorah is not the most favorite part of the Shul service for many people, but that's a mistake, because the Haftorah often contains some real gems and really inspirational material, which is a pity to miss. And the Haftorah of yesterday wasn't the Haftorah of the Parsha, but it was the Haftorah of Shabbos HaGadol. The Shabbos HaGadol gave us this Haftorah, which has a special significance. What is the Haftorah of yesterday? So very briefly, I could give the whole shiur on this, but very briefly, this is the final chapter of the Novi Malachi. And Malachi, the very last words of Malachi are in the Haftorah of yesterday. And what's interesting about the last words of Malachi is that actually Malachi was the last Novi, the last prophet ever to function in this world. In other words, Nevuah ended with Haggai, Zachariah, Malachi, full stop. They were Seif HaNevuah, says the Gemara. The end of Nevuah took place with the closing words of Malachi, and therefore the last lines of Malachi are the last lines of Nevuah ever said. So in a sense, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is using the prophets, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, right, Yoel, Amos, Nachum, Habakkuk, HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses the Nevi'im to transmit a message to the Jewish people. Malachi is giving us the concluding message, a message which has to last us all the way through the exile, all the way through the dark period where there are no prophecies, up to and until the Messianic era. So what does he say? What really is he telling us with this prophecy? So the first thing he says is, Zichru Toras Moshe Avdi. The first thing he says is, the crucial issue for maintaining Jewish identity and maintaining Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael is to remember the Toras Moshe. In other words, Toras Moshe is at the heart of whatever it is the Jewish people are doing in every generation. That is fundamental. And then he says something very beautiful. And then he says, Hine onochi shaleach lachem es Eliyahu hanavi lifnei bo yom Hashem hagadol v'haneh. Says just before the redemption comes through the Mashiach, I'm going to send Eliyahu hanavi. In other words, what he's really saying is, Nevuah is now being switched off. There aren't going to be any prophets during the Second Temple era or any subsequent generations of the Jewish people. But the next time you'll hear Nevuah, it'll be Eliyahu hanavi. Eliyahu hanavi will come, and he will announce the imminent arrival of the Mashiach. But I'd like to have a look for a minute at that pasuk inside in the text. And of course, I can't find it. Just 1 second. 1 second, bear with me for a minute. See if I can get this. I don't know why I'm not getting this screen. It sometimes happens to me. or why. Should come up on the screen, and it doesn't. Bear with me for a minute. Sarah, have you got any advice for me? Can't hear you, you're muted.
You have a source sheet, or you're trying to find it somewhere else?
No, I've got a source sheet. I've got a source sheet, which is
Minimize Zoom.
Which is a Google Doc, which is on my.
If you minimize the Zoom, you might be able to see what's behind it.
Yeah, I've minimized the Zoom, and I can see it. I can now see the document. I just can't share it with you.
Okay, so click on share screen.
Second.
You've done this more than I have, Rabbi.
Yes, I know.
If I can teach you how to do it, you know more than I do.
I've now clicked on share screen.
And then it should give you a choice of screens to share.
Right, but it doesn't. It doesn't give me a choice of screens. I don't know why. I don't know why. And this is very annoying.
If you can send me the link to the Google Drive, I might be able to share it.
Okay, there we go. You see? Somebody who understands how these things, always useful having somebody around who knows how these things work.
If you put it in the chat, then everybody can open it.
Oh yeah? What shall I put in the chat? The share link?
Yeah. Technology is amazing when it works, but frustrating when it doesn't.
Amazing when it works. And this time it hasn't worked. Okay. So I could put it, you say I can put it in the chat?
Yeah, send it to everyone. Okay, then everyone can open it.
Can you see in the chat? Can you see a document in the chat? Is that working? I've never done that before.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and share it now. How's that?
Oh, wow.
Can everybody see that? Someone give me a thumbs up if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yes, I can see.
How do we make it a bit bigger? Make it a bit bigger.
Do that.
Thank you. It's all clear here.
You like zoom in on it a bit? It's a bit small, the writing.
Yeah, no, like that.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you, Sarah. Good. Excellent. Excellent. But you're going to have to scroll down for me because I can't scroll down. Okay, so let's just have a look at this. The end of the Haftarah of Shabbos HaGadol. So have a look at this pasuk. Hini anochi shalech lachem es Eliyahu hanavi lifni bo yom Hashem HaGadol v'hanora. So he's saying that Eliyahu hanavi will come. But what do you notice about the word Eliyahu hanavi in this pasuk? What do you notice here? That it's spelt in the Torah, Aleph Lamed Yud Hey, without the Vav at the end. It's actually it's like a Greek sieve. Greek sieve means there are several words in the Tanakh which are read differently to the way they're written. And here the word Eliyahu is written without a Vav. So bear that in mind. And now Sarah's going to scroll us down a little bit to another pasuk in Vayikra chapter 26, which is in Parshas B'chukosai. In Parshas B'chukosai, the Torah is giving us the Tochach, is giving us a prophecy of doom and destruction and punishment and exile and difficulties and sufferings. And it seems like from the description of the Torah that Klal Yisrael are almost on the brink of elimination. And then the Pasuk here says, V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov, v'af es brisi Yitzchak, v'af es brisi Avram, Ezko, v'oretz Ezko. I'll remember my covenant with Yaakov, with Yitzchak, and with Avram, and I'll remember the land. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembered his promises, and because of his promises to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Jewish people will be redeemed. The implication is whether they deserve it or not. But let's have a look at this. What is interesting about this pasuk is that the name Yaakov is spelled Yud Ayin Kuf Vav Beis, which is, it's never written like that in the book of Bereshis. It's never written Yaakov with a Vav. So here we have something very interesting, that Yaakov has an extra Vav, and Eliyahu Hanavi has a missing Vav. Okay? Rashi picks up on this, even though Rashi did not have a hard disk search machine of all the missing Vavs and additional Vavs in the Torah, but somehow he knew every word in the Tanakh. So have a look at Rashi. So Rashi here says, V'zacharti es brisi Yaakov. So Rashi brings down a midrashic way of addressing this textual peculiarity. Rashi says, B'chamisha makomos nichtov mole. If you go through the whole of the Tanakh, you will find of the many dozens of times that the word Yaakov, the name Yaakov appears, 5 times it's written mole. It's written with an additional vav, a superfluous vav. And he says, Eliyahu Choseh b'chamisha makomos. And the name Eliyahu is written 5 times with a deficient spelling, missing a vav. What is going on here? What is going on here? Says Rashi something very beautiful. Yaakov notal os mishmosh Eliyahu, a rovoi. That Yaakov metaphorically, midrashically, the Torah is telling us that Yaakov, so to speak, grabbed hold of one of the letters of Eliyahu's name, and he took it as an Eiravon. An Eiravon means he held it as a security. In other words, he stole something, so to speak, from Eliyahu, and he said, I'm not giving it back to you, sheyovo v'yivase geulas bono, until you come and do your duty. And your duty is to come at the time of the Mashiach and announce the imminent arrival of the redemption. So what's going on is something very fascinating in the text. The Chazal tell us here, Rashi brings down the Chazal, that there's a connection. I want you to think about this for a second. What's the connection between Yaakov and Eliyahu in this context? Yaakov is the very, very beginning of Klal Yisrael, the birth of Klal Yisrael. And in fact, the name Yisrael is Yaakov. Yaakov begins the family, which will eventually be the 12 tribes, which will develop into the people of Israel. And the whole of Klal Yisrael begins with this man, Yaakov. But he was concerned. He knew that they would go into exile, they'd lose their way, they'd have difficulties, they'd come close to being destroyed. But he had this promise from Malachi. The promise from Malachi was that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will come and bring eventually a redemption. So he wanted, so to speak, to make sure this would happen. So he took a vav from Eliyahu's name, and he said, I'm only giving it back to you when you come and do your duty. And I haven't got time to go into it now. For those of you who want to look at it more closely, there's a very beautiful piece by the Maharal of Prague, writing 500 years ago, on this Rashi in his commentary Gur Aryeh, where he speaks about this whole idea that in some way Yaakov wanted to make sure that at the end of days his descendants would be redeemed. And this can only come about through Eliyahu Hanavi. So he took from him the vav. But pay attention to something very interesting. He doesn't take from him 1 vav or 2 vavs. He takes 5 times the vav. And this is a very interesting relationship to the what we know of as the 5th cup. The 5th cup at the Seder table is because this is the fifth, if you like, dimension of Eliyahu Hanavi, that after he did all the things that he did first time round, he has to come and announce the redemption of Klal Yisrael. So Sarah, if you can get us back to a full screen now. We'll get us back to a full screen for a minute. So here we have the first thing I wanted to share with you, and that is that the fifth cup on the table is Eliyahu Hanavi in his full identity, right? The Maral writes that the name of a person in the Torah is his yi'ud, is his destiny, is his full function, his full purpose in life. The idea of removing moving a letter from the name of Eliyahu Hanavi is that Eliyahu Hanavi's purpose in life and his destiny has not yet been fulfilled until he eventually comes and brings the Geula, and therefore the Kos Chamishi, the fifth cup, represents the ultimate redemption. So I'd like to just give you this taste, and I'm going to develop this throughout the Shiur. What is the Kos Eliyahu? And you must mention this at your Seder table. You've got to point to this fifth cup, and you're going to say, this fifth cup is really telling us something of extreme importance, that we are celebrating tonight the Geula, the redemption of the Jewish people. We're celebrating the creation of the Jewish people and the redemption, me'avdus l'cheirus, miyoga nesimcha, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of potential distraction and slavery and brought us into freedom and gave us the Torah. But the cup of Eliyahu carries the message that the redemption of Leil Seder is still an incomplete redemption. It's incomplete. It's not complete until Eliyahu comes and redeems his letter Vav from Yaakov, and he comes to announce the Messianic era. In other words, what we're dealing with on Leil Seder, this is a very profound idea. We're celebrating a Geula, but it's not a complete Geula. It's a Geula which carries within it the promise of a complete Geula. The Kos Chamishi is the cup of a promise that this Geula will come to its completion through Eliyahu Hanavi. And that Malachi says that Eliyahu Hanavi is the person who will indeed give us that assurance, ba'achris hayomim, at the end of days. But in the here and now, we haven't yet got it. So now I'd like to explain to you how this works in the whole Haggadah. Having given you really the core idea, I want to now build this into the Haggadah as we know it. So we know, for example, that in our Haggadah there are 4 cups of wine, which are connected to 4 expressions of Geula, right? 4 expressions of redemption. So if Sarah will take me back again to the text, please. For some reason, I'm not able to do so, but take you back to the text, and then we're going to have a look at the origins of this idea that the 4 cups. Right, so scroll down. Okay, let's have a look at this Rambam for a minute. Here we have the Rambam telling us, I want to read this with you for a moment. The Rambam tells us la halacha. He says, "Va'achakach notel yodo mavorich berkas hamazon al kos shlishi b'shasehu." He's talking about you bench over the 3rd cup. Va'achakach mosei kos ravi v'gomel avas halel, and then you do what we always do, is the 4th cup and say Hallel, right? And then have a look at the next paragraph, the Yeshlo Limzo Kos Chamish. And then he should fill a 5th cup, Veloma Olov Hallel Haggadah. And he should say the Tehillim that we say at the end of the Haggadah, which is called Hallel Haggadah, Tehillim Kuf Amud Vav, which is the Tehillim of Kila Olam Chazda, Hodel Hashem Kitab Kila Olam Chazda. All the psukim ending with the word Kila Olam Chazda is Hallel Haggadah. up to and including Al Naras Bavel. And then look what he says here at the end. This fifth cup is there. The implication of the Rambam is that you should drink the fifth cup. It's clear from this Rambam that you don't just fill the fifth cup, but you drink it, but drinking it is not a chovah. You're not obligated to drink it. You can if you like, but it's not obligatory. The first 4 cups are obligatory to drink. The fifth is not obligatory. And our minhag is not to drink. But the truth is, it's a bit surprising. And the reason why we don't drink it is because when Rabbi Yosef Karo came to write the Shulchan Aruch, he did not include the fifth cup in the Shulchan Aruch for reasons which are not entirely clear. But he didn't. But the Rambam does. The Rambam brings us the fifth cup, and it's there, and it's filled, and we drink it, only it's optional. And Sarah, if you'd like to scroll down again, please, if you don't mind. And I brought you also the Rosh. The Rosh is one of the other most significant commentaries on the Gemara from which we learn halacha. And the Rosh also says, Tanu Rabbanon, Kos Chamishi. Can you see I've highlighted the 2 words, Kos Chamishi, in the 4th line here. Omrim Olav Halal HaGodel, Dibur Rabbi Tarfon. Right? Rabbi Tarfon says, so he's actually quoting the Gemara, which says that Rabbi Tarfon says there's a fifth cup. Right? And if you highlight, Sarah, highlight the last line on this page, Mashma, says the Rosh, that Rabbi Tarfon, Kos Chamishi Havele Chova. He says, from the Gemara, says the Rosh, if you ask me, drinking this fifth cup is obligatory. But he says, the minhag is that it's optional. So we have something very curious going on here, that both the Rambam and the Rosh, both of them, the most prominent halachic codifiers on the Gemara, tell us that the fifth cup is important, but the drinking of it is optional. But the minhag is that it's optional. But it's clear that you can drink it if you want to. And this is a very interesting thing. You can, if you like, drink the fifth cup. Why did Klal Yisrael have the minhag not to drink the fifth cup? And it seems to me, so let's continue. You can continue scrolling down for a minute. So here you have, let me show you something. Here you have the origin of the 4 cups are in like these first 4 lines here. So I've highlighted 4 words. V'hotzeisi, I will bring you out of Egypt. V'etzalti, I will save you. V'ga'alti, I will redeem you. And then in the 3rd line, v'lokachti eschem la'am, I will take you to me as a people. And because of that, we have 4 cups. But the truth is that these psukim don't end there. If, Sarah, if you'd like to just highlight the next pasuk is the continuation. The continuation of that Shemos chapter 6 is that actually we've stopped in the middle of a paragraph because Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't say v'otzeisi v'tzalti v'ga'alti v'lokachti. He in fact says v'otzeisi v'tzalti v'ga'alti v'lokachti v'hevesi. The v'hevesi is the 5th expression of redemption. And the apostle, what does v'hevesi mean? V'hevesi eschem el haaretz. I'll bring you into the land of Israel. I have sworn to bring you into the land of Israel, and I will do so. And that is the 5th expression here. So now if you scroll down just a little bit more, you get a text here from the Baalei HaTosfot. So we all know the Baalei HaTosfot were really some of the most important commentaries on the Talmud. And here the Baalei HaTosfot writes as follows, if you'd like to do a little highlighting here, if you don't mind, Sarah. So the Baalei HaTosfot say, the Dalad Kosot, the 4 Kosot, Keneged Dalad Gulot, but says, the Kos Chamishi, right, and the 5th cup, right, the 5th cup, and then he says in the 2nd line, which is highlighted, Hainu Laman Tzarech Lemishtei, for somebody who wants to drink it. Why would you want to drink it? Says the Baalei HaTosfos. Keneged V'hevesi. That's because of the fifth expression, Shegamahu Geula, is also a Geula. Ked'isei, as we find it written, and he's quoting here a Medrash, Ked'isei in Ked'omri Inshe, as people say, Man de more shachre or mosa kodei biyadei, if a master frees his servant, but if he doesn't give him anywhere to live, my ahanile, what has he done for him? If you simply free a slave and let him go into freedom, and he goes out into the wide world, but he is homeless. So what sort of favor have you done for a slave that is now freed but homeless? Right? Says the Bali Atasis Pirush, ever Shishikhu Rabba Mosalo Gavir Biyodo, Imlo Heviu Lebeis Tiroso Ma Moela Kalatobo. What is the point of all the freedom if he's left him homeless? Says the Bali Atasis, Hochanami here as well, Imlo Hevia Kodesh Baruch Hu Osam Le'eretz Yisrael Ma Moela Hem Yetzias Mitzrayim. So this is very powerful language of the Bali Atasis. Very, very powerful language. He's saying, what is the point of being free if we're left stuck in the desert and we're homeless? It must be that this freedom of Yetziat Mitzrayim has a final, has an additional stage to it, which is not yet in the Haggadah, but has to be mentioned on Leil Seder. The idea that at the end of this process, where were the Jewish people? They were homeless in the desert. They were in an unsustainable situation. And therefore, we have the fifth cup, and the fifth cup is optional to drink it. Right? Let's, can we just go, maybe we can stop the screen share just for a minute. I just want to speak a little bit about what I've just now mentioned. So what have we seen? Something very fascinating. We've seen that actually the Rambam and the Rosh have both told us that the fifth cup has to be filled and drunk as optional, not as obligatory. Why is it not obligatory? The obligatory part is to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for those stages of the redemption that we have experienced and of which we are beneficiaries, and we are giving thanks. With every additional cup, we're giving thanks. But at the same time, there is this awareness, the awareness that this Geula has not yet reached its conclusion until you haven't come to the land of Israel, right? And until you haven't built the Beis HaMikdash and established Klal Yisrael firmly in the place where they should be ultimately, until that's happened, the Geula of Yetzias Mitzrayim is only a partial Geula. So in actual fact, the fifth cup carries what I consider to be an exceptionally important message. Exceptionally important, because it really it sheds a light on the whole narrative. The whole narrative of Leil Seder is that we are describing all the great benefits we got from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? But we understand that the final stage has not yet been completed. I'd like to add, of course, that we are living in the 21st century, and we have already tasted a little bit of this last, the last stage of the Geula. The last stage of the Geula of coming to Eretz Yisrael, has also a little bit been realized. Not at all completely yet, sadly. We don't have a complete grasp of the land of Israel. We're still sadly attacked by lots of enemies. We still haven't spiritually got the message across to large parts of the Jewish people. We still haven't got a Yerushalayim Habanuya. We haven't got the fully built Yerushalayim. Happened? Something happened. We haven't got the fully built Yerushalayim, but the promise has already. We are baderech. We've got our foot in the door of the fifth cup, and therefore I think our attitude in our generation to the fifth cup should be different to the attitude of our parents' generation or all previous generations. All previous generations looked at the fifth cup and said, Eliyahu Novi will come and bring us back to Eretz Yisrael, but that is a dream. Hoyinu kecholmin. That is a dream of the distant future. And therefore, I think the minhag evolved over the centuries that the fifth cup, you don't touch it, you don't drink it, you have nothing to do with it, because it's just really a hope. The cup of Eliyahu was the cup of hope. That's what it was. The awareness that the Geula is incomplete, but we have the hope that one day it will be completed. I think in our generation, if somebody wishes, I'm not saying one has to drink the fifth cup, but if you look at the Rambam and the Rosh, who tell you that if you want to drink the fifth cup, you can, right? I think that in our generation, it already makes a bit more sense to have a little bit of a drink from the fifth cup, because the fifth cup represents something which is unique to our generation, that we are already tasting. Maybe we can't drink the whole cup, but we can have a little taste of the fifth cup, because we are already tasting the message of Eliyahu Hanavi. And I think that is an extremely important part of the Leil Seder. So we've seen that Eliyahu Hanavi is the fifth cup for two reasons. First of all, it's the 5 vovs that he is missing throughout the Tanakh, which will be restored to him when he comes and does his job of bringing the Geula. That's the first number 5 connected to the cup of Eliyahu Hanavi. The second number 5 is the one mentioned by Darsa Kainim Bali Atosfos, is the Vehevesi. And now Sarah's going to take us back to the text, and I'm going to show you another number 5. There's another number 5 in our Haggadah. Let's continue here. Can you see I've got here written the Bikurim statement in the Haggadah. We read in the Haggadah of several psukim from the book of Devarim, from Parshas Kisavai. And the psukim read, if Sarah would like to highlight it, we read Rabbi Oved Ovi, Vayered Mitzrayma, Vayogosham B'msei Ma'ot. That whole pasuk is read at the Seder night, and we give interpretations. What is this pasuk? I've written here the Bikurim statement. It means every farmer who brought his first fruits to the Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash, he didn't just come and say, here are my first fruits. He said, these are the fruits of the land of Israel, and my being able to harvest fruits in the land of Israel has a whole story to it. What is the story? Right? And then he has to recite. He has to recite. My father was a refugee and went down to Egypt. Scroll down, please. And the Egyptians oppressed us. And then Vanitzach, and we cried out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he heard our prayers. And then next pasuk is Vayotzein Hashem Mitzrayim, the Yod Chazaka of Israel and Tuya. If you'd like to highlight that last pasuk, Vayotzein Hashem Mitzrayim, the Yod Chazaka of Israel and Tuya. How many psukim do we read in the Haggadah from this story? This is sort of the briefest account of the whole narrative of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We have 4 psukim, and then we stop. After those 4 psukim, we stop. But the truth is, there's a 5th pasuk. If you look there in Parshas Kisavo, there aren't 4 psukim. The man who brings Bikurim does not say 4 psukim, he says 5 psukim. And what is the 5th pasuk? He says, is this one here, which Sarah just highlighted. And then he brought us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard our prayers, took us out of Egypt, Yetzias Mitzrayim, and then he brought us to this place, and he gave us this wonderful land, Eretz Zoas Cholav Udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. So what's interesting here is you have once again the same phenomenon of 4 psukim in the Haggadah, but those psukim are cut short. The author of the Haggadah purposely cut out the 5th pasuk, because the 5th pasuk relates to the final stage of the redemption, which we haven't had realized yet. And certainly throughout the thousands of years in the Galus, right, was not realized at all. And don't forget, this is the Haggadah which was written for Klal Yisrael to say in the diaspora. We're saying this is the Haggadah for the diaspora. And in the diaspora, we say only 4 out of 5 psukim, and we drink only 4 out of 5 cups. But once we're back in Eretz Yisrael, already drinking the 5th cup makes more sense. And maybe that's why the Rambam and the Rosh said to us, if you want to drink the 5th cup, you can. Maybe what they meant was, if you're living at a time when you can already feel that the 5th pasuk and the 5th expression of Geula is relevant, then you can drink the 5th cup, right? But most of Klal Yisrael throughout most of Jewish history looked at the 5th cup simply as a dream cup. It wasn't a reality. It was just a dream. Let's go back to let's leave the text for a minute and go back to the screen. So I'd like to just share with you the idea that I want to develop this evening. We have, of course, the narrative of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the famous narrative which we love and which we've gone through every year. But all the time that we are sitting there at the Leil Seder, we're looking at this 5th cup in the center of the table, and we know that this cup is Eliyahu Hanavi's cup. Right? And really, what represented a dream throughout the millennia is nowadays just a tiny little bit less than a dream. It's more of a reality. It's already something which is closer to us. And if the Rambam and the Rosh tell us that you can drink the cup if you want to, so this should be at least an option. Even if you don't particularly want to drink it, you don't have to, but at least you should mention that the kosher Eliyahu is something which is closer to our lives than it has ever been before. That is a very special blessing, really, of Eliyahu Hanavi. And Eliyahu Hanavi, actually, there's something also very interesting, an interesting connection between Malachi and Eliyahu Hanavi. So Malachi is the last of all the prophets. And what he's saying to you is, the next prophecy you'll hear is Eliyahu Hanavi. But there's something very fascinating here, because the Gemara in Megillah tells us that Rabbi Shiur ben Kocha had the view that actually Malachi was the pen name of Ezra. There was a man called Ezra, and Ezra was the Nasi, the president of the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah. Ezra was the Godel Hador of the generation that built the second temple. And Ezra was the Godel Hador who innovated lots of mitzvahs to Rabbana. Ezra, for example, gave us what we call today the Seder. The text of our davening was put together by Ezra HaSefer. He instigated the fact that the text of our tefillas should become standardized across the whole Jewish people, because he realized that only a fraction of the Jewish people would come back to the land of Israel, and many of them remained in Bavel, many of them remained in Egypt, and maybe even in North Africa there were some at that time, and they all were speaking different languages. And he didn't want that in every shul and in every place throughout the diaspora, people should be praying to God in different languages. So he instituted the Hebrew text of the Seder. And many other halachas were instituted by Ezra HaSefer. But here comes an interesting thing. Ezra also wanted to give us a nevuah. He wanted to give us a prophecy about the fact that building the second temple was the current state of affairs, but there would come an eventual redemption. So he took upon himself to write a book called Malachi. He called himself Malachi, right? And because he's Malachi, he gets in the Tanakh. As you all know, the Tanakh means Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. So the book of Ezra is in the Ksuvim. The book of Ezra is not written prophetically, but Malachi is. That he is actually able to function in 2 different ways. Ezra is able to function as a Talmud Chacham, who is able to be one of the, arguably the greatest Rav, the greatest rabbi of his generation in the book of Ezra, and leading the Jewish people as a rabbi of the generation. And at the same time, he's a prophet, right? And that is very interesting because Eliyahu HaNavi also has this double persona. Eliyahu HaNavi, we say that Eliyahu HaNavi will come and he will resolve all the unresolved halachic issues, right? There is in the Gemara often debates and discussions about halachic issues, and it ends with the words. Anybody know what the word is that it ends with?
Teiku.
Teiku. That's right. The word teiku, tof yud kuf vav, which simply in Aramaic means it's unresolved. It's left open. That's what it means, teiku, right? It's used in modern Hebrew. Some of you might be aware of the fact that in Ivrit, they use the word teiku in the field of sports, where when a football match ends up as a draw, if it's 2-2 or 3-3 at the end of a football match, they say the result is teiku, right? Because teiku means nobody's won, both sides have done their best, and it's unresolved. So they borrowed this Talmudic word and they brought it into the use on the football field, which is typical of how Hebrew has been, if you like, popularized by Ivrit. But the word teiku is actually an acronym, Tof Yud Kuf Vav, which means Tishbi Yitaretz Kushyos V'Boyos. Tishbi meaning Eliyahu HaTishbi, he will come, and this unresolved issue will eventually be resolved by Eliyahu HaNavi. All the unresolved halachic issues we've got will be resolved by Eliyahu HaNavi. But the commentaries ask a question, and this is a subject for a whole Shiur. I'm just mentioning it in the closing minutes of this Shiur. Before Hashem asks a question, but surely we know that there's a general principle about halacha, that Nevi'im are not allowed to use the power of Nevuah to paskin any halachic issues. Halachic issues can only be resolved through a certain mechanism of bringing proofs and arguments and understandings and psukim, and Rabbi Shmuel Omer, B'Shlosh Midas, Kal V'Chomer, Zereshava. There is a mechanism by which you can derive halacha from the Torah. You can't come along and say, I've had a prophetic inspiration that this is the halacha. That's not allowed. So why is Eliyahu HaNavi allowed to give us halachas? So the Mefarshim explain, the Maritz Chayas, the Mishnah Lamelech, lots of the Mefarshim explain that actually Eliyahu HaNavi, like Malachi, had a dual role in Jewish history. He's also a prophet, but he also functions as a Talmud Chacham. He's a man with supreme Torah wisdom. And therefore, when he is teaching us Torah, that Torah comes from him not as a Navi, but as a human being with human intelligence, inspired human intelligence inspired by the deepest possible knowledge of Torah. And therefore, he can resolve all the halachic issues in the world. And as a Navi, he can come and he can say, I prophetically know that Mashiach is round the corner. I just want to mention to you, there is a song, Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, right? Why do we say Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi? Because these are the two different roles that Eliyahu plays. Eliyahu HaNavi is when he comes, he's got two visiting cards, Eliyahu HaNavi. On one visiting card, it's written, I'm Elijah the prophet. And on the other one is written, I'm Elijah the Talmud Chacham, who comes with the wisdom of Torah to resolve Torah issues. So when it's Eliyahu HaTishbi, the word Tishbi comes from Malachim Aleph chapter 17, I think, which speaks about Eliyahu HaNavi and the town that he came from. Tishbi is simply a reference to the city where he came from. So Eliyahu HaTishbi means Eliyahu the human being, not Eliyahu the prophet. The human being who is a man of great knowledge. And Eliyahu HaNavi comes with Nevuah. So therefore Malachi had a special sympathy for Eliyahu HaNavi. He knew what it meant to be both the Gadol Hadar and the Novi Hadar, all rolled into the same person. Ezra is Malachi, and Eliyahu Hanavi is the man who gave us, who will give us the nevuah of the ultimate redemption. And when we look at the case of Eliyahu Hanavi, right, we should think about the fact that the Geula of Mitzrayim was phenomenal, was transformational, transformed a slave nation into Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh, into a nation dedicated to Avodas Hashem. But actually the narrative of the Haggadah is incomplete, and we're waiting for Eliyahu Hanavi to come to complete the story and to get his Vov back from Yaakov, and that we can really drink the fifth cup completely and fully, Bez Hashem, once he's come to do his job. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, a little bit of a taste of the fifth cup. It means much more than maybe you thought it means. And maybe I'm just suggesting in our generation that maybe there's more reason to drink from the fifth cup, to follow the Rambam and the Rosh, and to drink from the fifth cup. There's more reason to drink from it than in earlier generations, and at least to appreciate the symbolism that it signifies. It just remains for me to tell you, please God, to have a Chag Sameach and to enjoy your Leil Seder and to enjoy the people around you, family and friends. And once again, thanks to Graham and Belinda for giving us the opportunity to learn Torah together. And please God, we should get together in good health for many years to come to continue learning Torah together, all of us together. Thank you very much. That's it for tonight.